Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with an update video today. We'll have a bit of a chat about what's going on here in Spain. For example, the election results from the Castilla and León elections that were held the other day. And we'll also have a chat about education in this country as the topic popped up in the comment section yesterday. So let's go. Now I'm on the road again today. Have to go into Madrid. Got something that I have to do there. So we'll take a drive into Madrid. And as I said, we'll have a bit of a chat about those election results from the weekend election there in Castilla y León. Now, if you're not familiar with the results of that election, it was victory to the Partido Popular. They managed to get a couple more seats, or I think quite a few more seats than they did in the last elections. I think they got 7 more seats than in the last elections. The Socialist Party, the PSOE, got 7 or 8 less seats, I think, than in the last election, so they went down a bit. And the big loser from these elections was the Citizens Party, who went from 11 seats down to 1. So not good for that party. And as I said yesterday, I think parties like Citizens Party, Podemos, are on the verge of extinction here in Spain. And I'll tell you the reason why I think that in a minute. So basically what's going to happen is that the PP party, the Partido Popular, doesn't have enough seats to govern alone. They have to do it either by somebody not participating in the parliament. So for example, the Socialist Party, if they don't vote, if they abstain from voting on certain things, the Partido Popular can govern there, or they can join in a coalition with Vox, who was the big victor from the weekend's election because they went from 1 seat in 2019 to 13 seats in this election the other day. So they were the big victor. Now, where did the Vox votes come from? That's the question. And basically they came from the Socialist Party, and they came from the Citizens Party. And the reason this is, I've listened to a few experts talking about this, and the reason this is that not because Spain has all of a sudden, or that region, decided to vote for the far right. Basically, from what I have gathered, it is a protest vote. People are not happy with the way things are being run in the country at a national level by the PSOE and the Podemos coalition, primarily because of some of the deals that they have done with political groups that 20 years ago wanted to destroy the country. So they're not happy with that. So they have voted in protest for Vox. So as I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that Spain all of a sudden is moving to the far right. No, protest votes. So there was a protest vote back in 2019, and that's how the Citizens Party, for example, managed to get those 11 seats. And again, a protest vote here, but voting for the other extreme. So basically that's the situation, I think. Vox has said that they want to be in government with the Partido Popular. They want to form a coalition. But as we have seen over the last 5 or 6 years, these smaller parties that do form coalition governments end up disappearing, which is the case of, as I said, Podemos and the Citizens Party, because they get less and less votes as the years go by in these coalition governments. So the Vox strategy, people think, is maybe not to govern, but just to sit back and get as much power as they can from afar, not actually go into government, because when they go into government, that could be the end of them. So if they sit back, which is what they've done in other parts of Spain, for example, here in Madrid, I think they sit back and they influence their opinion. I think they also do that in Andalusia and some other parts of the country as well. So not clear whether Vox really wants to go into a coalition government or not, or whether it's just hot air at the moment to get publicity. That is what experts in this country think. And I probably tend to agree with them. But time will tell. if indeed Vox does form a government in Castilla y León. And that's going to be the interesting thing over the next couple of days or so, as the results, or not as the results come through, because we know what the results are, but when all of these pacts and agreements and decisions are taken behind the scenes that we don't see, and we'll see who actually ends up running the government there in Castilla y León. The Partido Popular in that area has been in power for the last 30 years. I'll say that again, the last 30 years. So that party in Castilla y León doesn't know what the opposition's like. So, as I have mentioned on other occasions here in Spain, democracy at the autonomous community level, although they have elections, people tend to vote for the same party election after election after election. The Socialist Party was in power in Andalusia for 35 years. The PP in Valencia has been in power for a long time, or they were in power for a long time. I think it changed in the last elections because of all of the corruption scandals there. And here in Madrid, the Partido Popular has been in power also for decades. And Castilla y León, no different there. So that is a summary of the elections in Castilla y León that were held at the weekend. Now, the second thing I want to talk about today is education. We had a comment from an American guy yesterday saying that he wants to come and live here in Spain, retire here in Spain, and he's got a couple of kids, one 8 and one 12, and he wanted to know how much we pay for private schools here in Spain. I said that it depends. If you go for a purely private school, because remember there are 3 types of schools here in Spain. You've got your public school, which, as the name suggests, is public and free. The only thing you pay for is the kids' lunch and also books and things like that. So there's no other fees associated to public schools, 100% subsidized by the government. You've got in the middle between public and private, you've got a school system called concertado or concerted, and as the name suggests, it's a shared education. It's a semi-private, or another way of classifying these schools is a publicly funded private school that also gets money off the parents that send their kids to these schools. That's the type of school that my son goes to, and prices can vary according to the school, but I pay 170 euros a month for the tuition, let's say, and another 130 for his lunch. So 300 smackers flying out of my pocket every month for my son's education. And then you've got the private system, which, as the name suggests, is completely private and doesn't have any influence from the state at all, except in the curriculum, I think. And fees in purely private schools here in Madrid, anywhere from 550 euros up. There are some schools, the more elite private schools, like the British Council School, the American School, where you could pay around 1,000 euros a month. And I said yesterday that a friend of mine sends his daughter to the French International School, and he pays around 750. So that's what you're looking to pay for a private school, a purely private school. But if you go for the one in the middle, which is the concerted school, you can pay anything from 35 to, like what I said, 170 or even more for these schools. A lot of the times these schools are religious, and they ask you for a donation. So, for example, you give a donation to the church or whoever is running that school. Sometimes they're run by private foundations, and sometimes they're run by religious groups. So keep that in mind if you're going to send your kid to a concertado school. Now, my son went to a public school before. Now he goes to one of these concerted schools. So I can talk about the difference between the two. and the quality of education is similar. I don't think one stands out more than the other. However, I would say that in the private system, or the concerted system, because the teachers are not state teachers like they are in the public schools, of course, and they're more switched on in that regard, because obviously they are continually being evaluated in a private school system. Whereas in a public school, once you get your position, you basically answer to nobody. And that is one of the biggest problems that we had with the private school system, especially when the pandemic began, because we saw that the teachers in that system basically just didn't care if kids had school or not for those 3 months of the hard lockdown. And that's why we took the decision to move our son to one of these concerted schools or semi-private schools, because in the case of another lockdown, fortunately it didn't happen. Well, it did happen there for a little while when kids were forced to study online, but they're well set up when it comes to online learning, unlike the public school at the time. I'm not going to say that public schools haven't adapted to this new reality that we live in nowadays. A lot of schools have. For example, a high school that I know well has adapted quite well to online learning. So some schools obviously have, some schools haven't. But one of the big problems with public schools is the funding and the resources that these schools have. And that's one of the, as I said, one of the main differences. If you're paying money to a school every month, obviously they're going to have more resources. So that is something that you need to keep in mind. And one of the other big differences with this type of school, the concerted school or the private school, is that you can have continuous education from primary school all the way through to high school or secondary school, which is something that you're not going to get in a public school, because in a public school you've got your primary school and then you've got your high school afterwards. They go to after year 6, so year 7 they go into the high school system, and your child is going to have to change schools, and maybe he'll go to a school different from his or her friends. So you need to keep that in mind as well. Whereas the concertado schools, a lot of the time, or probably in the majority of the time, in the private schools as well, as I said, they go all the way through, sometimes K-12, kindergarten through to year 12, as we say in Australia. So that is a big difference as well. If you want your child to have continuous education at the same place, keep the same friends, then that type of school is recommended. And I'll just go back and touch on teacher quality. As I said before, one of the things that made us change was the teacher quality during the pandemic. And we've found now that, as I said, the teachers in this concerted school are on their toes, let's say, because, as I said a few minutes ago, they're constantly evaluated, whereas that doesn't happen in the public schools. And in the public system, you can find teachers that are a little bit, as they say here in Spain, pasota. They basically couldn't give two hoots because, as I said, they answer to nobody a lot of the times. So keep that in mind as well. So I'll start to wrap the video up, but basically that's it. If you're looking to put your kids into school here in Spain, those are the three choices that you have: public, concertado, and private. And of course you've got bilingual schools, but they're not really bilingual schools per se. Kids are not, learning all of the subjects in English. It's, I think, 75-25, I think, my son's school. And the English lessons are not bad. I'm quite happy with the way he's learning English in this school compared to the last one. But if you go to one of these international schools, whether it be the French school, the American school, British Council school, the education is going to be completely in the English language or the French language or the German language, and the curriculum is also based on the British system, the American system, the French system, and the German system, to have an idea of what that is like. So that's it, wrap the video up. Questions and comments, please leave them in the section below. Debate the video out as you normally do. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Let us know if you have kids in a school here in Spain, what your experience is like. I'll see you later. Hasta luego.